Account 1.
Staying home alone should be relaxing, a time just for me to disconnect from the outside world. That night, I was comfortably on the living room couch, a blanket over my legs and a bucket of popcorn beside me, watching a horror movie I had rented. The rain outside was gently tapping against the windows, creating a melody that perfectly matched the atmosphere of the movie. Everything seemed peaceful until my phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. "Hi, enjoying the movie?" I was intrigued. I looked around as if expecting to find someone smiling at a joke I hadn't understood. But I was alone. Maybe it was a friend trying to scare me? I decided to ignore it, thinking it was just a bad joke. I turned my attention back to the movie, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. Minutes later, the phone vibrated again. "I like your blue shirt." A shiver ran down my spine. I looked at my shirt, blue, just as the message described. Anxiety began to turn into fear. "Who's there?" I asked out loud, my voice trembling slightly. The silence in the house felt oppressive, as if the walls were absorbing my screams. The messages started coming more frequently, each one more disturbing than the last. "You look comfortable on the couch." I looked around. Every shadow in the room seemed to hide a threat. I got up and closed all the curtains, trying to block any outside view. But the messages didn't stop. "There's no use trying to hide." My heart was racing. Each beat felt like a drum inside my chest. I needed a rational explanation. Maybe someone had installed cameras in my house. I started desperately looking for anything that seemed out of place, but found nothing. The feeling of being watched was unbearable, and I could feel the panic growing inside me. Then I received a message that made my blood run cold, a photo of me, taken from the hallway, looking directly at me on the couch. The image was grainy, but unmistakable. Someone was inside my house, watching me. Fear turned into pure terror. I dropped the phone and ran to the front door, desperately trying to open it. Locked. I went to the window and tried to open it, but it seemed like they were all sealed. I went back to the phone, my hands trembling so much I could barely hold the device. I tried calling the police, but there was no signal. I checked the landline in the living room, only to discover the line was cut. I was alone, without communication, without help. Every little noise, every creak in the wooden house, seemed like a warning that time was running out. I ran upstairs, trying to think of a plan. Maybe I could hide in the attic and find a way out through the roof. As I climbed, I received another message. "There's no use hiding. I'm already inside." Panic paralyzed me for a moment. I continued up, deciding I had to fight for my life. In the attic, I found an old chest with tools and grabbed the heaviest one I could find. The sound of the attic door creaking open made me hold my breath. The faint moonlight illuminated the figure entering, and when I saw its face, my heart stopped. I could barely breathe. Panic gripped my chest like a vice, and my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Clutching the heavy tool I had found in the chest, I prepared to face whatever it was. The attic door creaked again, and I could see a shadow moving slowly down the hallway. The faint moonlight partially illuminated the attic, creating dancing shadows on the walls. The figure approached, slow and calculated steps, as if knowing I had nowhere to run. When the person finally entered the attic, the sight left me in shock. It was my old friend, Lucas. The same Lucas I hadn't seen in years since we had a terrible fight, and he disappeared from my life. His face was covered by a horror mask, a mix of anger and perverse pleasure. "Surprised to see me?" he said, with a tone of voice that sent chills down my spine. "Lucas, why?" My voice barely came out, trembling and weak. "You should never have ignored me. You should never have betrayed me." His voice was a menacing whisper, each word filled with deep hatred. He advanced, and I raised the tool like a weapon, ready to defend myself. But before I could react, he pulled something out of his coat, a remote control. He pressed a button, and suddenly, all the lights in the house went out, plunging us into almost total darkness. I heard a soft click and then a low, constant hum. "You have no idea what's coming," he murmured, almost to himself. Suddenly, the attic was flooded with a series of screens hidden in the walls, all showing different angles of my house. Every room, every corner was under surveillance. I was trapped in a surveillance nightmare, and Lucas was in control. "You always liked being the center of attention, didn't you? Well, now you will be." He laughed, a sound that echoed in my head. "Welcome to your personal horror show. Enjoy." As I tried to process the horror of the situation, the screens started showing images of intimate moments of mine, recorded without my knowledge. The psychological terror was overwhelming, and I could feel my sanity slipping through the cracks in the attic. Suddenly, one of the screens showed the front door slowly opening. A new figure entered the house, silent and shadowy, and my panic increased as I realized I was not alone. Lucas had planned something much bigger than simple revenge. I was trapped in his web, and every passing second was taking me deeper into the abyss of fear. And then, the main screen switched to a live feed of the attic, showing me in real time, desperate and cornered. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was Lucas smiling, a smile full of madness and triumph.
Account 2.
The night was disturbingly silent, almost oppressive. It was my first time alone at home since I moved into this place. I can't quite explain why, but there was something uncomfortable in the air. The house, usually warm and familiar, now seemed strangely unfamiliar and hostile. Every noise, no matter how slight, echoed like thunder in my ears. As I brushed my teeth before bed, a sense of unease began to grow inside me, slowly turning into a palpable dread. My tired eyes were fixed on the bathroom mirror. That's when I noticed something disturbing. The reflection in the mirror wasn't matching my movements. My heart started racing. I raised my right hand, but the reflection seemed to hesitate before doing the same. I blinked several times, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. But the longer I looked, the clearer it became that something was terribly wrong. Slowly, I approached the mirror, my eyes scrutinizing every detail, searching for a logical explanation. Maybe it was a trick of the light, or just my tired mind playing tricks. But even these rational explanations couldn't drown out the growing fear that was taking hold of me. Still shaken by the bathroom experience, I decided it was time to go to sleep. I left the bathroom and turned off the light, hoping the darkness would bring some comfort. But then, in the oppressive silence of the house, I heard a sound that made me freeze, the loud, clear sound of glass breaking. My heart raced, and before I could think, I ran back to the bathroom. What I saw made my blood run cold. The mirror was shattered, with glass fragments scattered across the floor like shards of a once peaceful night brutally interrupted. What was even more frightening was the fact that a large piece of the mirror was missing. I looked around, my heart pounding uncontrollably. The shadows seemed denser, darker, as if hiding something I couldn't see. Every fiber of my being screamed for me to leave, but something kept me there, a mix of fear and morbid fascination. The feeling of being watched was undeniable. It was as if a sinister presence had escaped from the mirror, lurking in some dark corner of the house. I could feel its eyes on me, following my every move, heightening my paranoia with each passing second. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but the fear was real, tangible. Chills ran up my spine, and the house, once a refuge, was turning into a labyrinth of terrors. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and small noises echoed through the hallways like whispers from an invisible entity. Every step I took seemed to echo in an endless void. My body was tense, ready to run, but my feet felt heavy, as if bound by invisible chains. With every shadow I saw, every noise I heard, the sense of dread grew, turning the night into a living nightmare. As I tried to stay calm, something inside me knew that the situation was far from normal. The presence I felt was real, almost tangible, and the only thing I could do was confront this unknown fear now inhabiting my home. The house was plunged into an unsettling silence, as if waiting for the inevitable confrontation. The sinister presence I felt was no longer a vague sensation, it was a certainty. Something, or someone, was there with me, hidden in the shadows, watching my every move. I knew I couldn't escape this time. I had to face whatever was haunting me. Breathing heavily, I gathered all the courage I had left and began to explore the house. Each room seemed darker and more oppressive than the last. Shadows danced on the walls, shaped by the faint moonlight seeping through the windows. Every step I took was a test of nerves, every noise a potential attack on my sanity. I reached the guest room, a place I rarely used. The door was slightly ajar, and a cold draft seemed to emanate from within. With each step toward the door, the feeling of being watched grew stronger, more intense. I pushed the door open cautiously, and it creaked in protest, revealing a room enveloped in darkness. That's when I saw it. In the farthest corner of the room, where the light didn't reach, there was an indistinct figure, a shadow darker than the darkness itself. My eyes tried to adjust, but the figure seemed to move, contorting in a way that defied logic and reality. "Who's there?" My voice came out trembling, almost a whisper, but laden with desperation. The figure didn't respond but began to move toward me slowly, as if savoring every moment of the terror it inflicted. The temperature in the room dropped abruptly, and my breath formed small clouds of vapor. I wanted to run, to scream, but my body was paralyzed with fear. The figure came close enough for me to see its eyes, 2 points of absolute darkness, empty yet filled with indescribable malevolence. It felt like I was staring into the abyss itself. Then, suddenly, the figure stopped. A distorted smile appeared where its mouth should have been, a smile that conveyed no joy but a promise of suffering. And then, before I could react, it vanished, dissolving into the shadows as if it had never been there. But the terror was far from over. Behind me, I heard the sound of heavy, labored breathing. I turned slowly, feeling my blood run cold. And that's when reality shattered completely. I was looking at myself, my macabre and distorted reflection, with the same malevolent smile on my lips. The house plunged into absolute darkness, and the last thing I heard before being engulfed by the darkness was the sound of glass breaking again, as if the mirror itself were laughing at my misfortune.